Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Greg Allen. I'm the Chief Executive of Future Care Capital. We're a 70-year-old charity. We're an innovator and an investing organisation, and we're all about raising the debate around a fit-for-purpose health and care system for the future. Now, last week we launched our residential care tech landscape review, and thanks to Dr. Peter Bloomfield from Future Care Capital and also Chris Ruith from New Market Strategy, our key partners in this research. And also a special thanks to Professor Martin Green, the Chief Executive of Care England, and Vic Rayner, the Chief Executive of the National Care Forum, NCF, for their forwards in the report. Very grateful for that. Now, the report and the research explores the technology which is being developed for the residential care sector. And this is actually the fourth instalment in our FCC Care Technology series. And that includes previous research and events around mental health care tech, learning disabilities tech, and home care tech. And as I say, each of those reports was complemented by a live panel event like this one, a debate, a panel discussion with some really thoughtful insight. And we're really looking forward to that again today. Now, in terms of this event, it's been kindly sponsored by Nourish Care and by Predicare. And thank you so much for your support in helping us make this event happen. We've got a great panel of speakers with us today. We've got Christina Ruth, Senior Consultant from New Market Strategy. We've got Nuno Almeida, the founder, CEO of Nourish Care, Lee Omar, the founder of Safe Steps, and our own Dr. Peter Bloomfield, the Head of Policy and Research at Future Care Capital. So thanks again to Nuno Almeida from Nourish Care and also Ketan Shah from Predicare for your sponsorship of this event. And I'm now going to hand over to Peter to chair the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start with a presentation of some of the research so we can go through some detail, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion. And throughout this afternoon, if you have any questions or thoughts, please do pop them in the attendee questions. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have far more questions than we can address in the session, but usually we follow up after the session for any unanswered questions. Okay, so I'm just going to share some slides. Okay, so everyone should be able to see that now. And there's a little bit of background to what we're going to talk about today. I just wanted to highlight some recent work by Ipsos Mori and the IPC, who've been commissioned by NHSX. And this survey that they conducted was a really good initial step to look at digitization in the care sector, and particularly the rates of adoption of digital technology. So if you get a chance after this session, I'd recommend looking through some of the findings and think about how they fit with what we're discussing here today. Everything that we're talking about through this series, as Greg mentioned, there's 4 reports in total, and we've looked at different areas of the adult social care environment. Audience that are familiar with our work will have seen the other 3 reports and associated events. Today, we're focusing very much on the residential care technology environment. This is defined in the report, and we've got some of the sub-branches of residential care here. The only notable exception from this list is dementia care. We don't consider that in the report because it's such a specific topic that it warrants its own research. And there are some really good reports out there looking specifically at dementia technology. I'm going to hand over to Chris now from New Market Strategy, who will introduce herself briefly and then go through some of the key findings before we move on to the discussion. So over to you, Chris.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Peter. I guess by way of a short introduction, can everyone hear me, by the way? You can. Brilliant. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm a senior consultant at New Market Strategy. I have a background in market access and digital technology and medicines, and I've spent a lot of time understanding the barriers and enablers of digital innovation spread. I was the research lead and co-author for this report, as well as 2 previous installments in the series focusing on mental health care and learning disability care. And to provide a bit more context, the goal of this final installment was to look at 4 things specifically: to provide a snapshot of the technologies in development, to understand trends in residential care technology pre and post-COVID, to describe the opportunity for technology in this sector, and to make recommendations on how to stimulate the market growth to policymakers. So if we look at this slide, in terms of what we actually found, we found 58 companies that met the report criteria. And this number is comparable to previous reviews. So we had found 56 in mental health and about 43 in home care. We had expected to see a lot more companies due to the volume of users in this market, but I guess it's worth noting that there were some really large providers that we didn't quite capture in our research. And it's also worth noting that even though there's only 58 companies, some of these companies developed multiple products. So we ended up assessing 82 technologies in total. And there were 37 platforms, 16 IoTs, Internet of Things, and 29 apps. There were quite a lot of combinations between them as well. And compared with previous reports, there's just a fairly even spread because the previous report had been very app dominated. That being said, the overwhelming majority of technologies were used for sort of productivity reasons, such as a better management of care in residential settings, suggesting that these are really well established in the UK. And if we look at the geography and at the map for a minute, the technologies are actually fairly evenly spread out across England. But in contrast to previous reports, most of the technologies are actually based outside of major urban centres. So only about 25% of the technologies were based in London, for example. And there are a number of factors influencing this, which we detail in the report, one of them being demographic trends in the elderly, which is a big group in residential care settings, but certainly not the only one that we looked at. Similar to other areas of care, residential care is relatively fragmented and innovations dispersed throughout the nation. On investment, it's really interesting to note that we only had data for 11 companies, and the average investment was £4 million. And this is much higher than the average of home care, for example, which is £800,000, or even your average healthcare software company, which is £3.4 million, which is something that we discuss at length in the report. And if we go to the next slide, please. So I've told you a little bit about the companies we found, and now I'll talk to you about the technology. And so for our research, what we did is we segmented the technologies by function into 4 main groups. And the first is remote monitoring, which I'm sure our viewers will have heard about before. And this includes technologies that can help monitor individuals in residential care settings. For example, full alarms or full preventions, such as Safe Steps, which is here on the panel today, COVID tracking in home settings, general monitoring of vital signs, or monitoring to ensure that residents are complying with social distancing regulations. This was one of the largest groups of technologies we saw. It was the second largest. And the biggest one was actually care management. And this group of technologies basically helps carers do their jobs faster and easier. So it includes anything from care planning and recording all elements of care, electronic care records, case management, or digitized paperwork. And this was the largest technology group, suggesting that there's a considerable need for efficiency driving solutions in the UK, which I'm sure will come as no surprise. It's a pretty broad umbrella of technology, and it's where we would have classified Nourish and Pedicare as well. And then we have 2 smaller groups of technologies, each having 5 companies each only. The first is workforce mobility, and this group of technologies allows for carers to rapidly move between care settings to meet demand and facilitates anything to do with recruitment, which is massively important during the coronavirus pandemic. And then we have assistive technology. And this group includes any technology that allows residents to live more independently and to have more agency in their day-to-day lives. And this was the only group of technologies that was uniquely focused on residents, that were for resident use, which is quite an interesting thing in my opinion. I guess it's worth noting that we had a pretty broad scope in terms of what we were looking for, but there were some omissions in our research. Particularly, we noticed there were some gaps in tailored solutions when it came to young adults in residential care settings, learning disability, and also palliative care technology. We did not find much in those areas at all. As I'm sure you can tell, a lot of thinking went into developing these segmentations, but we are very happy for our thinking to be challenged or for people to make any suggestions, so please feel free to get in touch if you do. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Brilliant. It's always challenging to try and summarize a sort of 30-page report into 5 key points, but I'm going to do my best. The first point that we should just get out of the way is that residential care technology can improve the quality of life of residents by supporting them to live more independently and to have more connected lives, and also provides care workers with the tools to deliver high quality and personalized care. But looking at the broader picture, it can also really help to understand what is going on in the social care sector by providing data and help people to convey the story of what's going on in social care and residential care in a compelling way. And I think it's important to note that in addition to scaling current uses of technology, there's also an opportunity to use digital technology differently, to develop new interventions or to optimize care pathways. And here further research would be really helpful, particularly in 2 areas: in more consumer-based technologies, so technologies that are directed to residents specifically, and in green and sustainable technology, which is something that we've not really seen a big emphasis on. So now that we've established that more research is needed, for this research to be aligned to the needs of the sector, we suggest that better demand signaling processes are needed. And here connecting startups to established brands or charities or commercial entities to support with the technology co-development process through trusted partnerships would be really beneficial. And I know that our innovators have perhaps had different experiences here, so I'm sure they'll be able to add more color to it. And of course, an obvious thing to say is that given that there's opportunity for growth, there's also a scope to put in place appropriate incentives to support that technology development, uptake, and scale. And this could be anything from ring-fenced funding to regulation to standardize how the benefits of digital technology are captured and measured and shared. And finally, anytime we talk about digital technology and trying to grow the market and improve access, we need to think about implementation and usage. And here, the implementation of digital technology relies on the users, which are usually carers, that will actually have to use the technology on a daily basis. So access to a widespread digital upskilling program would provide the technical capabilities that are needed, as well as career development and progression opportunities that could help to drive more people into care jobs. So those are some of our take-home messages. There are plenty more insights in the report, so I would encourage anyone that has not read it yet to please give it a go. And I will hand back to Peter now.
Thank you very much, Chris. And just to reassure everyone, you should have all had the report already, but we'll follow up after the session and send it out again. So just to make sure that any people who registered last minute will also have a copy. There's a huge amount to discuss, obviously, and I'm not going to go through each of these because they'll form the basis of our discussion in a minute. But all that's left to say is thank you all very much for joining, and we'll get into the main bulk of the discussion now and start hearing from some of the panelists. So if you guys want to come in and turn your cameras on, we can get started on the main event. Lovely. So what we're going to do is just start with some general introductions, and what we'll do there is get Nuno and Lee to introduce themselves and what they're working on, and some of their perspectives on the sector and the report itself. So if we go to Lee first, if you could introduce yourself and what you're working on, and just give us a brief description of your interpretation of the findings.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, so my name's Lee Omar. I'm the founder and CEO of Safe Steps. It's a digital health company which prevents falls in care homes, and it also connects residents and their carers with GPs and the NHS. I kind of got into this sector because I was a carer for my granddad, and he had a fall. It was quite a tragic one, and his life really deteriorated after that. So I was working in technology, and I made it my mission to try and prevent falls for my granddad and people like him. That led to me co-designing an app specifically for care homes about 5 years ago, and that was commissioned by a local authority in the Northwest, and it allowed me to co-design this fall prevention app with care home managers and carers and commissioners and GPs So it gave me a good understanding of how care homes work. And for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been a non-exec director for a care home group. So I've got a good understanding of the challenges facing care homes, and I understand it's quite a low level of innovation and technology. And my company is trying to kind of speed that up, and get social care and care homes especially just more connected, and being able to leverage technologies which we see a commonplace in other sectors. As that's kind of been my mission. 18 months ago, we created the world's first COVID management app for care homes, which became like a virtual ward round tool. So that was connecting the doctors with the carers and helping carers at a very tough time. So we deployed it the first week in April. So I think I've understood the challenges facing the sector the last few years, and I see a lot of the technology that comes into the sector and gets offered, and a lot of it is just not that good, in my opinion. It's not that well designed. I don't think we're getting the best products in this sector, and I think that's part of the reason why we haven't got huge take up in digital products. I don't think we can blame the market failure on the customer, like as if there's something wrong with the care homes. If the products aren't good, they don't sell. And I'm sure if Apple or Google tried to do something, I'm sure it'd be interesting, and it'd probably sell. So I think the challenge is for the tech companies to be better at designing and empathize more with people who work in care homes, and also the families of people who live there and the people who are receiving care. Don't try and design for a population which you don't understand. I thought the report was great. There's just some great insights, and I learned loads from it, and it clearly picked up that there's a bit of a, I guess the term's market failure, but I'm not sure exactly what the reason for that is beyond what I said before. Not much budgets running care homes. They've been running out kind of okay using things like paper in the past, so it's not a priority necessarily to embrace new technology when budgets are so tight. So that's a kind of quick introduction to me. I don't want to talk for any longer, but I'm sure we'll get some questions.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Lee. Really good introduction. And if we pass over to Nuno now, if you could introduce yourself and your background and your insights.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Lee. I think that Lee just stole my pitch, because there's a lot that Lee said that I couldn't agree more with. Personal story, I grew up in Portugal. I grew up in a fairly peculiar, hindsight is a beautiful thing, so I kind of blame my upbringing for a lot of what I am today. My family home shared a border with the largest mental health hospital in Portugal. Same town, kind of other side of the street, there was a working farm for people with learning difficulties, and that was the sort of environment I grew up in. So people, and by the way, mental health, kind of late 70s, early 80s was when people started realizing that the best possible kind of life experience and quality of care for people living with mental health conditions was not just medicalizing them out of their existence and closing them in rooms. So actually, I was surrounded by people that were managing their conditions. And frankly, I thought that everybody else lived the same. So for me, that didn't feel strange or different. I ended up doing computer science. I ended up taking a master's in data science and machine learning. This was late 90s. So this was the previous hype curve of AI. We went on a downslope from there, and I think we are experiencing the next one now. Now, fast forward a few years, and I found myself always working in usually software reliability problems or high complexity engineering problems. I work with a lot of defense and aerospace solution designers. I worked with a lot of aircraft manufacturers, and frankly, I think 10 years of engineering, pure engineering, started raising quite a lot of questions in my mind as to what is it that I want to be remembered for, and what sort of impact do I want to deliver in the world. And I had a very early midlife crisis. So in 2008, I found myself really in a situation that most people describe as golden handcuffs. So you're running a very successful, fast-growing business, offices in 4 places around the world, one of which was the UK. So I ended up moving to the UK on the back of that company. And everything was going our way, and frankly, I was waking up and not realizing, not getting it, not feeling what is it I'm trying to do. I mean, actually, I summarize it as turning intercontinental ballistic missiles into slightly more reliable intercontinental ballistic missiles. Just didn't do it for me. So, I mean, long story short, I sold my stake in that business, and this was just before the financial crisis hit in 2008-9. I didn't see it coming. I could have written a book about it, but I was too busy thinking, well, okay, if that didn't work for me, what is it that is going to work for me? I was living in Dorset at the time. I still am. Fell in love with the place, I think, and clearly. The reason behind me being uncomfortable before is the why, which is something that became a bit of a common thread. So if we are going to design some bit of technology, why are we doing it, and what sort of impact do we want to deliver? Social care caught my eye for a number of reasons. I thought to myself, if I'm going to start a new company, I want to make sure that this is a company I don't feel the need to start thinking about selling 5 years down the line or 8 years down the line. I've been doing Nourish now for 10 years, and I have no urge of selling, so kind of that worked. I found a sector that has pretty good kind of market fundamentals. So if you're just thinking about startup, and I mean, I have to be honest, I really wonder why is it that we don't see more startups in social care. I think, I mean, it probably is a combination of, I don't know, the image of the sector, or perceptions that the sector doesn't have money. I think those things don't help. But at the same time, I see it as a market where the most disruptive technologies are yet to happen. So I see it as a market of massive opportunity, because I think, and what we've seen in this report in many ways reflects my own experience. So we started designing a product in 2013. That was after 2 years of me doing volunteering in care homes, volunteering with community care teams, spending time with care workers that still today are my friends. And I mean, my learning was not part of my job role for those 2 years. Learning was my job role for those 2 years. So I've done nothing but spend time with people that are receiving care, people who live the experience. I guess I went through that as well, because my grandparents went through that cycle. And having the experience of being on the receiving end of care, on the providing end of care, at the same time that I like to think quite a deep knowledge of what technology can do, I think gave me an understanding of the fact that designing a solution for this sector that has a long-lasting impact is a non-linear problem. So it's not as straightforward, buy a lean startup book and start implementing based on a stakeholder map. There's a lot of complexity to the sector. I think ultimately anyone designing solutions in this sector needs to be thinking about the people receiving care and people living with frailty, or people living with any needs that they can't meet themselves. I think, I mean, being provocative, we as a sector, we have a challenge with it not being very well structured, and therefore I think that gives me the opportunity to say, ultimately, let's just look at the people who receive care. What do they think social care should be? And actually, there are groups of people designing visions around that. You know, We all want to live in a place we call home, with the people and things we love, in communities where we look out for one another, doing what matters to us. This is the vision for social care as defined by Social Care Future, a group of people, I mean, from different walks of life, but with a lot of people with lived experience. Now, my vision of how to develop a software platform to help people take the best out of digital is that we should be all trying to contribute towards that vision. And along the way, we need to be paid, we need to pay bills, we need to create teams that give us the capacity to provide the services we provide. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we should all be doing, regardless of which startup, which part of the problem, which part of the landscape we're operating in. And for as long as we're doing that, I think we're going to be okay.
Lovely, thank you, Nuno. And it's really interesting hearing the parallels between your experience and Lee's experience, and also hearing some new things that I hadn't heard about before. So that's excellent. We've already got a few questions coming into chat, so please do keep those coming in. I'm going to start off the discussion with a few questions that we've prepared. So I'll start by asking Lee. So I know that you've had quite an interesting development cycle in terms of your product, and you've had some quite unique interactions with the care sector, and I just wondered if you'd be able to discuss some of those approaches that you've taken, and particularly focused on your insights between local deployment and achieving national scale, and where do the difficulties come in there?
Got you. Yeah, so like I said before, I didn't intend to design products for care homes. I was trying to solve a problem for my granddad in his home at the time. So like any tech company, I went to the user, and that was him. And I put sensors in his house and kind of had an app that connected me to him. And I was trying to solve a problem around detecting falls quickly. And that wasn't really the problem that the system had. It was the problem that I'd identified with a very small, kind of narrow view. But I guess because I was kind of telling a lot of people about it, I was approached by people in the social care commissioning world, so people who pay the residential and the nursing homes, and they liked this kind of the co-design approach. And that's kind of what worked. And it took a while. It took a year to get the first prototype, because there's so many different stakeholders you've got to speak to, and everyone's got a slightly different opinion. So we kind of started slow, and that's how we got the traction. And once we prevented falls, and you could see we prevented by about 28-30% in the first year, there was other care homes were interested in it, and the kind of word got around the borough that we were in. So it kind of got traction very quickly in one borough. And then it was kind of organic. We got approached by Age UK on Twitter. So, it was somebody from another region reaching out to us. So they were very innovative. They heard about what we were doing, and we did a similar thing in another region. And it was very organic. At the start, it was we didn't know what the business model was. We didn't really know what we were doing. We just knew we had something that worked, because we were led by clinicians in its development, and we were led by people who run these residential homes. So it was small. It was a small deal for 25 homes and 50 homes, and then maybe 60 homes, or a small group of 12 care homes, and that was the way it grew during the the pandemic, because we were in a few hundred homes at this point. We were just kind of in the right place at the right time, where we could pivot that technology. And then there was a wish to take what we were doing nationally very quickly. So it's kind of been quite chaotic, hasn't it, since March 2020 anyway, because we've been so prepared to just move fast and try new things. We've just continually built on that original app and kind of turned it into more of a platform. But we're working nationally with, when you pitch to like the board of NHS England, you think, oh, you're going to get a big deal, and you pitch like 15 people, and they've all got their own little opinions, and then they get ministers involved and that type of stuff. So national kind of doesn't work. You just get tied up in bureaucracy. But I think you can do kind of regional deals. You can work with a part of the NHS or the council systems, and maybe kind of do a project to get into 500-600 care homes in one go. But it takes a lot of social capital. It takes a lot of networking. It takes a lot of people kind of advocating for you, and there's no real science. I couldn't say we had this business plan where we said we'll do this and then we'll do that and then we'll do that. I think it's been organic and being able to respond very quickly. So make a new product in 2 weeks to respond to someone's need, and that's that's the opportunity. It is ripe for disruption if you just think, how can I respond to the need and make people's lives better? If you go in with that attitude, I think you can scale relatively fast. But if your attitude is, I've got this product and it's really good at sorting out a rota for care staff, and really good at detecting when someone falls out of the bed, and we're just going to keep pushing it, well, you're just another product, which is doing the same thing as another company, and it's hard to differentiate yourself. So I think this sector's got a lot of that, but it's kind of worked for us because we've moved fast.
Hey, thank you very much, Lee. And there were a few chuckles around the table there when you mentioned some of the bureaucracy and the national level. How does that compare to your experience, Nuno?
Well, in our case, I guess the approach was one of continuous learning. To an extent, it still is. I mean, we are now deployed at just under 15% of the UK market of care providers. So we have about 2,000 care teams using the product day in, day out, and that accounts for somewhere between 50 and 80,000 people receiving care from care teams that use Nourish. And I think that we are probably one of those companies that is a real pain for someone like Chris in doing a research like this, because we designed the product and the services around the product in a way where actually we are always focusing on the person at the end of the chain receiving care. But for doing that, we need to do quite a lot of legwork in terms of deployment of timelines, care planning solutions, assessment frameworks, reporting endpoints, lots of integration with the existing systems. I mean, GP systems and you name it. But at the end of the day, all these are mechanisms for us to expand impact. So we're very, very clear that what we want is to serve as many people receiving care as possible. Most of the people receiving care nowadays are able to themselves use Nourish. So we are a care management system, but we are also a self-management system if people want to use it that way. Increasingly, what we see is care providers are configuring Nourish so that the entire care experience is so snug to each person receiving care that they're having an experience which is completely unique to them. And not just unique to them, their ability to make decisions and own their care journey is also unique to their ability to make decisions. So if they're able to make choices around their food preferences, they use Nourish to choose their food, or they use Nourish to say which activity they want to do this afternoon. So that ability to adjust and morph to different types of care pathway or different environments or different conditions is what justifies us being so successful and getting to where we are now. How did we get here? I mean, we started by selling to the first care home. It's as simple as that. And then realizing that actually, I mean, what Lee is describing is actually only true for a segment which is not the majority of care providers in the UK, which is, the segment of public funded care. that's about 45% of the UK market of care provision. The remainder is self-funders. So it's people using their own money, moving into a care setting that they choose and that they decide to call home. Now, in that environment, people can start using technology even before they choose which care home they want to use. There's plenty of platforms out there that actually just map out what, it's almost like your TripAdvisor for care homes. I mean, I could name 4 or 5. Once people engage with that platform, they are in a funnel to choose what is the place that they're going to call home. Once they join that place, if they're using a technology like Nourish, they can engage with Nourish to manage their care, to self-adapt to the environment, and to a great extent, the fact that we have a platform that is so adaptable and that is so interoperable then means that if that person moves to a different care site, their information flows with them. And that includes into hospital. If they're admitted into hospital, key information about an individual goes with them. If they come back from hospital, key information about that discharge comes with them. Now, if you are going to have that approach, you can't really have a single kind of template Salesforce. You need to be able to sell into small providers. You need to be able to sell into the medium size, so the 5 care home group to 80, like 80 care homes groups, and above 80 care home groups, you probably have about 30 or 40 care providers in the UK that are a significant chunk, and you need to be able to sell to them as well. At the same time, that you then need to engage with CCGs, future ICSs. You need to engage with local authorities, engage with families, engage with CQC, you name it. So it's not a simple exercise of creating a proposition and just bombarding a one-size-fits-all sales proposition to a buyer. I think we need to be clear about who is paying. In our case, the payer is the care provider. Now, how the care provider covers for those costs is very different depending on the environment.
Thank you, Nuno. And as a follow-up, do you think that there are particular things out there that have really helped in getting a foot in the door in those different environments as you change context? So, for example, are things like the assured suppliers lists and those sorts of mechanisms, are they helpful, or is it another layer of bureaucracy?
Oh, no, I think the assured suppliers list is definitely going to be helpful. I mean, we're yet to see results from that, but it's definitely going to be helpful, mostly because there is a big distance between people developing a prototype that solves a local problem, and there's a big difference between that and scaling up to, say, serving a third of the full market. And as part of that journey, I think the market needs to gain confidence that the solutions that they are about to buy are robust and are actually going to be long-lived and evolve with those care providers. Now, I'm packaging a lot in that, because what the approved suppliers list that NHSX is putting together is doing is not just creating a shopping list of people that were star rated in some shape or form, but it's also bringing together players, i.e. suppliers, together with the likes of PRSB or the likes of Interopen, to make sure that anyone who wants to play in this space is going to be really open to collaboration with other partners, some of whom may be considered competitors, but that they will work in a collaborative and co-producing environment that will lead on to better information flow and ultimately better experience for people receiving care. Now, how did we crack as a company? How did we crack serving in so many different environments? I mean, I perhaps should have mentioned that we currently employ over 50 people. Out of those 50 people, over 20 come from a care background. So we're not a software company full of software people. We do have really good software people, but we have a product design team that employs 5. I mean, those people, all they do is design. So when Lee said the importance of design, let's never underestimate the importance of design for an environment that is so human-driven. But also, let's not underestimate the domain knowledge that people need to have if you want to be selling into a certain domain. So we have an ex-operations manager from a mental health care provider working with us. We have people that work in nursing homes for 20 years working with us. We have care workers that come from care in the community working with us. And we have NHS GPs and consultants advising us. So there is a combination of knowledge that we need to bring to the table, so that ultimately, at the end of the day, you're never actually selling a product. You're actually allowing clients to start thinking, and our clients are care provider teams, to start thinking about what would their care pathway and their care services look like if technology allowed them to think differently about the care that they deliver. So it's not about functionality anymore. It's about, okay, if you had no barriers, what would be an ideal care provision look like from your point of view, and then bring the technology in to make that happen. So that's where we come from, and that's why 70% of our clients are in older people's services, but then 20 are in learning difficulties. We have schools for special education needs. We have quite a long tail of other types of care that are all extremely well served in a very, very snug environment. But this is because we have the knowledge, and we created a product that allows us to configure for such vast array of different presentation of needs, presentation of frailty, and different types of services.
Excellent, thank you. And there's quite a few points there that we'll touch on, because they relate to some of the questions in the chat. So we'll come back to those in a moment. But just before we move into the attendee questions, Chris, I just wanted to ask you a few questions about your observations of this research and how it compares to the subsectors we've looked at before, and what struck you as particularly unique, either for good or bad. But yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'm very happy to take on that. And I think we've touched on some of those topics already. But I guess the great thing about this research is that we've been focusing on social care, but looking at different market niches. And it's been really interesting to see how they're different or how they're similar. So thinking about residential care in comparison to home care, mental health care, or learning disability care. The other three were a lot more focused on consumer-based technology. Whereas this one was not, and we've touched already about the complexity in terms of sort of commissioning structures, and whether it's purchased by a local authority or self-funders. As a result, a lot of the technology is seen through a productivity lens, and so it's marketed in terms of how much resource or time it can save, because that is what will be the easier sell for the budget holders. Whereas a lot of the more maybe consumer-centric technology is focused on outcomes. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing at all. It's just interesting to see those distinctions and how technologies are marketed when the payer and the user are the same person versus when they're different. I guess another observation from me is that the residential care market is one of the markets where there's a lot of scope for growth for consumer-based technologies, because we've not seen a lot of them. So in our research, we found very few technologies that were targeted for residents to use themselves. And I think Nuno already touched on this, but our expectations of care are going to change over time. And I think people who move into residential care settings are going to expect it to be as digitized as any other environment, or as they would their own home. And so I think there has to be a shift there in the types of technologies that are being developed. And I guess finally, in terms of the similarities, it's actually really interesting that for each report, we've broadly sort of seen similar types of technologies, focused on remote monitoring, focused on sort of productivity tools, whether that be driving efficiency for medical teams or for carers, some assistive tech, and then some technology that was specific to mental health care itself. And I guess, a lot of these are about scaling existing approaches to care or enabling access to existing approaches via digital means. And as Lee said, I think there's a lot of scope still for disruptive technology and for new models of care to be put in place. So I think there's really exciting things that could happen in the future.
Lovely, thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's really useful to have your insights across them. I think I'm going to move on to some of the attendee questions now, and an area that has come up multiple times, both in the research and through our discussion here so far today, is this idea of design and engaging with the sector. And I think Martin highlighted it really well in the foreword. So looking at that mechanism of how to engage for better demand signaling for the sector. So I'll go to Lee first. How do you think demand signaling and that initial stages of designing tech can best be done, and how have you seen it work really well?
Yeah, I hadn't heard this term demand signaling until this report, but it makes sense. But I think it was Ellie, wasn't it, who asked that? I think your company is very good at doing this. You know, you're good at co-design. You're working with some of the market leaders who are bigger and more established, and you're kind of the cutting edge bit of those type of companies. I think it's just be open. You know, you're just co-designing with other people. You won't know what the insights are until you really start having these design sessions and really empathize, and then you'll get that nugget of insight, and then you'll build a feature or a product around it. So I think it just starts with trust, doesn't it? And kind of having a good relationship with the person that you're co-designing with. And as a business, you know, you've just got to be very open and you know, be respectful of people's time, and you know, try and create something where you both get value. I think that's the way it's always worked for me. So just speak to people, be yourself, and kind of just get co-design as quickly as possible with as many people as possible who are the end users. So I think the more people you speak to and co-design and don't rely on perhaps other companies to reach the end user, the better it'll be for you.
Cool, thank you, Lee. And Nuno, have you seen any particular examples where, maybe from the different branches of care that you've seen, where demand signaling is strongest?
I think that, this concept of demand signaling, I think this starts with people having the power to buy their own solutions. So if you think back 20 years, the technology for care market was completely shaped by who pays, which 20 years ago was mostly commissioners. So commissioners were buying, and still do buy, based on price and the minimum price that meets a certain standard. So for the previous generation, your wheelchair would be the cheapest possible that has wheels. Now, fast forward 20 years, and what we're seeing is that actually most of the age-related demand comes from baby boomers that spent the last 60 years being spoiled by consumer markets, which means that these people will want to have choice. Now, it has been my belief forever and a day that designing solutions for care is not designing solutions for care. It's actually designing good products for people, full stop. But we need to, as a sector, we need to start surfacing what is the buying power of the people receiving care, because that is at the root of the fact that from the point of view of innovators, the market is so opaque. You just heard it. Lee describes his approach to market as a triangulation with commissioners. We will end up, whether we want it or not, designing solutions and propositions for commissioners. Yes, I can describe Nourish as a proposition for optimizing patient flow. I would never do that, but ultimately, the magic of a really good product in this sector is a product where the impact in terms of outcomes for the person receiving care is very tangible and very clear, at the same time that you offer logistic optimization as a byproduct. So you end up optimizing patient flow, or you end up optimizing the turnaround times for investigations. Now, I don't know if improving demand signaling is going to do anything in terms of speeding up innovation. I think that this is a sector that is so busy with delivering care and just making do what with the resources they have, that innovating is probably a little bit harder than in other markets. But my suggestion is that for all innovators in this sector, just sit down and have a cup of tea with people that are actually in the thick of it, and you're 80% of the way there. It's spending time in the place where care gets delivered. Doing it at arm's length from academia, from anywhere that isn't a care home, makes no sense. So you just need to, I know right now it's really hard, but the moment it's allowed, spend time in care homes. And, volunteer, because if you volunteer to work in care homes, you'll have an open door, you'll make a difference, and you'll learn a lot from that experience.
I think those are some really good points. And actually, I think a lot of that addresses the question that I was about to ask from Ian about how best to reach people furthest from decision making to build in their insights to your products. Lee, is there anything further you'd like to add on that?
I think it's really simple. Go to the care homes and co-design. I just take my computer and sit in the lounge, and people come to you really quickly. So you'll meet families, you'll meet residents, you'll meet staff, and just by being there for a few hours, you've started to ideate and co-designing and get prototypes, and then you can test and validate them. So yeah, go to where the people are. I think that's the people who don't have the decision making. And Ian, maybe you're a commissioner. I think the conversation that I have with commissioners, I listen to them because I don't realize what the value is in these big data sets that I'm getting, but the commissioners are telling me, I'd like, you've got all this data. Can you help me get some insight from it? So I think to repeat what my colleague was saying, I think we're creating these little products and these little apps which turn into bigger apps or bigger platforms, and they're turning more into almost like a multi-sided marketplace. We all might use Uber because it's really good for getting a ride and it's reliable, but we've probably never thought what it's like for the drivers. But they've got they have to have a good experience as well, and Uber only works because it's good for drivers as well as riders. So I think the products of the future, which someone mentioned, they're going to be more multi-sided. And I think my colleague was saying that you kind of get value for commissioners off the back of creating value for the residents and the people who run the care homes.
Yeah, can I add on to that? Because I was reading the question from Ian. When you are developing solutions in any market, you need to be completely embedded in that market. So I spoke about going to care homes. I need to be clear. This is not just about paying a visit to a care home and designing something, right? This is living in and out of care homes. We had our Christmas party last week. I know, crazy. Risk takers. We had a Christmas party where everyone got together. You should try it. It's amazing. We invited clients to come over. We had people with learning difficulties joining us for our Christmas party. And what that means is that everyone in our team, from customer support that does 24/7 supporting care teams, down to our software testers, down to our kind of software engineers, specification engineers, trainers, everyone knows who are the people that we are contributing towards supporting. and that is really part of how you grow an organization to innovate in this space. You can't do it at an arm's length, and I think that's one of the main issues that I see in most organizations that kind of dabble with doing innovation in this space, is that it's kind of, when we bring two people with lived experience into a room full of whiteboards, and we have an ideation session, then we go around and develop a solution. I mean, you need to be in daily contact. It's not just about the idea or about one touch point. It's the entire journey of these people, which is really not that different from the journey that we have going through life.
I think that's really true. And I've just noticed the time always flies for these sessions. So I'm going to ask one more question, and it's going to be Mark's question. And I think I'll start with Chris, because you've got a really good overview of all of the sub-branches so far. And also you've seen where some quite out there tech has been developed in particular subsectors. So what types of technologies and what emerging technologies are you really excited about seeing, and where do you think the future for the sector is in terms of technologies being deployed?
Ooh, that's a really good question, and it's difficult in a way because there's so much potential, isn't there? But I think for me, data is such a big part of it, because it's about trying to create data. Gives you a window to really understand what's going on the ground and to be able to respond to that in the most accurate way. And I think, that's why, Lee, people were so excited about you having data sets at the back of your products, because that's what allows you to get the big picture. And I think having co-design and having this user-centric development is really helpful, but it only shows you what is going on in one little bit of this massive sector. And it's, if you're able to have these data sets and for them to actually feed into each other, that's when you get the big picture, and where you can make some, I think, reimagine and redesign how things work. And I think that's where a lot of the value could be moving forward. And that's why ICSs are so exciting. So yeah, that would be it for me.
Lovely. Thank you, Chris. Same question to you, Lee.
I've honestly got no idea. As an innovator, I don't think it's VR or AI or any of these buzzwords. I think it's just getting the products in the residential homes up to the standard of consumer digital products. And I think if we get there, that's a huge innovation. That's almost taken like analog to digital for this sector. So it's probably not as advanced as you might think, but it's only in the last year that care homes would have used Skype or Zoom, so it's, I think, more like the stuff that we know will be used in this sector.
Thank you, Lee. And Nuno, are you gonna completely disagree?
I'm not sure about disagreeing. I think that the sector is very, very diverse. So, I mean, it's not true that we only saw Skype and Zoom being used over the last 2 years. 3 years ago, way before COVID happened, we conducted a little survey with, I think at the time, 15 or 20 care homes. And we just asked them, I mean, what are the 3 things that people ask the first day they join the care home? So we're talking about people, I mean, if you want to stereotype it, it's someone 85 plus walking into the care home. And we had something like 40 responses, and we saw that almost without exception, what's the Wi-Fi username and password was one of the top 3 questions. So, I mean, throw all the kind of accepted wisdom away when it comes to use of technology in care homes. Now, adoption is very uneven. So at the care homes, at the end of the spectrum, where care homes are primarily paid for by local authorities, where fees are really, really low, it becomes really hard for people to invest. So there is a significant chunk, it's not the majority, a significant chunk of care homes are hard to reach when it comes to connectivity, just good broadband connection, and so on. Now, but what does the future look like? I would like to think that the future is a future where the minimum common denominator is dictated by collaboration between different institutions or organizations. So I would like to think that CQC will not accept a registration for a care provider that doesn't provide good connectivity to its residents and doesn't use digital for the benefit of the people they support. I would struggle to think why would local authorities have a different line of report where they ask for different information from the information that is already asked from, say, the NHS or from CQC. We need to simplify reporting structures so that the register manager doesn't see 30 or 40% of their living time being completely consumed by just reporting what is 80% of it is the same information to capacity tracker, to the local commissioners, to the local quality audit teams. Let's simplify what is asked of register managers, and let's use digital to simplify that. So I think that is the low-hanging fruit that is really hard to achieve if we don't have full digitization. And then on top of that, what I really want the future to be is, a million flowers bloom of everyone just becomes as different as they can be based on the cohort of the people they support. I would dread to think that 2 care homes that accept residents, or use Nourish to accept residents and manage their care, that they become alike because they're using Nourish. They need to become alike if the people they support are alike. So the entire ecosystem of innovation, if we do technology right, will enable people to innovate in their space, i.e., how can I innovate to provide this person with better care? Not how can I innovate by having more Wi-Fi IoT devices around the house.
Lovely. Thank you. No, those are some really good insights to finish on. And we're just past the hour, so all that's left to say is thank you very much to everyone who has attended and for all the excellent questions. There's a few we didn't manage to get to today, so I'll follow up with you after the session. And yeah, all that's left to say is we'll look forward to seeing everyone early next year. And please do get in touch if you have any questions or any feedback that you'd like to share with us. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks for the invite. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.